movements have to be for something, but they also have to kind of bounce against something. You need to know, who are you for and who are you against. I've always looked at what creates a movement. It's knowing, who's in and who's out, how we behave versus how we don't behave, what are we for versus what are we against, so that, people can galvanize around something.
Welcome to Uprising. Each episode looks inside what it takes to lead the most dynamic and successful cultural movements. Some of them in the business world, some in the social realm, some in politics, and some in between, to see why people start uprisings. What gives those initiatives momentum and keeps them going? And most important, what lessons can you learn from these movements and how to apply them to your business and even personal life? Let's explore the secret to sparking movements that move people into action.
Passionate ideas.
Controversial ideas.
Uprising ideas.
The power is now in the hands of anyone.
To start a cultural movement.
Today's Uprising Pod is brought to you by warbyparker.com. Get a free 5-day home try-on at www.warbyparkertrial.com/uprising. 5 pairs, 5 days, 100% free.
Movements are for good, have to be for something, taking a stand for something so that brands or individuals can advocate. They can stand on a pulpit and they can convince the crowd to be for something. But they also can be against something, taking a stand against a point of view, righting a wrong. You need to know who you are for and who you are against in order to lead a movement. I've always looked at what creates a movement from that perspective. It all starts from that simple point of view. What are you for? What are you against? And then declaring that change that you want to make in the world. And that means knowing who's in and who's out. It's how we behave versus how we don't behave. What we are versus what we are against. So that our point of view can galvanize people, can rally people around that point of view. False advertising can easily be defined as using messages that are false, misleading, or deceptive when trying to sell you something. Other words that we've heard most recently are fake advertising or fake news. No industry understands false advertising better than the tobacco industry. Over the past couple of decades, organizations formed to expose the truth behind smoking and the big tobacco industry. Today, the anti-smoking movement is one of the most successful movements of our modern time. My name is Scott Goodson, and today on the Uprising Podcast, we have a guest who is here to discuss this movement and the role that marketing and movement marketing plays. Please welcome CEO and President Robin Koval of the Truth Initiative, the organization responsible for some of the most recognizable anti-smoking advertising. Thank you for joining us today, Robin. I don't know if you knew this, but Ashley, who is our head of strategy, worked on your Truth Initiative for many years, and now she's a movement maker here at Strawberry Frog. But anyway, I just wanted to take a moment and say welcome, and we're excited to have you on board.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Before we get into the Truth Initiative, let's start more broadly. One of the most successful movements of this decade is the anti-smoking movement. How did it get started?
Well, let's go way back in the Wayback Machine. So 1964 is an important date. That was when the Surgeon General's first report on smoking and health was published. It was groundbreaking and very, very brave for the Surgeon General to have come out and taken on the tobacco industry as he did. But that was really the first big conclusive link to smoking and cancer, and that really was the birth of the tobacco control movement in the United States. I guess the other big landmark event, and it certainly was important for my organization, for Truth Initiative, was in the late 90s, in 1998, when the Master Settlement Agreement came about. And that had been a lawsuit that was originally started in one state, in Mississippi, and then became a huge multi-state litigation that ultimately was 46 states suing the 4, at the time, big tobacco companies, and was settled in the late 90s and is still the largest settled civil litigation in the United States. It was settled for over $200 billion. Most of that money went to, and still goes to, the individual states. The suit came about to help these states offset the tremendous expense they had in healthcare for all the people who were getting sick from tobacco. And a small portion of that money went to, no longer does, came to fund what was then called the American Legacy Foundation, now Truth Initiative, to create a nonprofit organization dedicated to youth tobacco prevention, to research efforts to advance tobacco control in the United States. And that ultimately became the impetus for us creating the National Truth Campaign.
What I find interesting is that your organization doesn't outright tell people to stop smoking. Instead, you set out to make sure smokers know the facts. What are some truths about the tobacco industry that many of us don't realize?
Well, the tobacco industry has a long history of bad acts. They are, as Judge Kessler stated in her decision, they are literally adjudicated racketeers. That's a big fancy word to say they lied. And they have a long history of lying that's been discovered in their own documents, of denying that nicotine was addictive. I think a lot of us have seen that photo of the heads of the tobacco companies with their hands raised, swearing before Congress that nicotine isn't addictive. We know that's a lie. They've spent, a tremendous amount of time engineering cigarettes so that they actually are more addictive. The tobacco industry told us that things like low tar and light cigarettes would be less harmful, when of course we know that's a lie too. So, many things taking us up when there's recently a big expose in Reuters showing how the tobacco industry has tried to interfere with international organizations through the WHO, the World Health Organization, in thwarting some of their tobacco efforts. Or as recently as just about a month ago, I guess, Philip Morris International announced that they're going to fund an organization called the Foundation for a Smoke-Free World, which will be dedicated to research to help understand how to make tobacco products less harmful. Which sounds like it would be a great idea, except the tobacco industry has a long history of creating fake science organizations to cast doubt and to, create questions about science. And $80 million a year sounds like a tremendous amount of money. I know it does to me. But if you think about that in terms of Philip Morris, that's like less than 1% of their annual revenues, which are in the hundreds of billions of dollars. So, they're still at it. And that's why, we have to remain ever vigilant.
The movement you're involved with is provocative, it's challenging. Changing human habits is almost impossible. Logic doesn't work. Nagging doesn't work. Advertising doesn't seem to work. So what has worked for you?
Well, you're absolutely right, especially when you're talking to young people, and that's always been our focus, one of the reasons we think young people are so important in eventually creating a culture where tobacco is a thing of the past is because the tobacco industry knows, and we know, that basically nobody starts smoking over the age of 24, 25, 26. 40-year-olds don't wake up and say, you know what, I think I'll take up a habit that's going to kill me tomorrow. But young people do. And so, we know with young people, things like health consequences, you're going to get lung cancer, you're going to get COPD, things like that. They're just not that real. They're very far off in the distance. And most young people will say, oh, well, I'll quit smoking long before that happens. And they think they do. The other thing that we know doesn't work is you can't tell young people what to do and what not to do. They have to feel like it's their own decision because you're coming into a time of your life when you are gaining power over your life. You don't want to be told. And so what we've really found has been successful for us on Truth from the beginning is when we trust young people, when we give them facts and allow them to make their own decisions and to reinterpret things in their own words and spread it now within their own networks, which are, of course, so powerful, that then they own the decisions. They feel that they're in control, and they can take action that isn't based on somebody telling them what to do, but based on them making personal decisions that are right for them. And the other thing that we know is really powerful is when we help young people understand how the tobacco industry works and how it's trying to manipulate them, exploit them. We would even say profile them by selecting certain kinds of individuals based on your ethnicity or based on how much money you have or how much education you have or your lifestyle choices. When we, sort of pull back the curtain and reveal those facts to young people, that just appeals to their natural sense of what's right and wrong in the world, and it's very, very powerful.
Just riffing for a second off the idea of things that aren't working, do you remember the old ads where people have holes in their throats due to cancer? Why are those ads not effective anymore?
Well, it depends who you're talking to. So the ads that you're referring to that show some of the very severe consequences of smoking, they're not effective for young people, but they actually are effective for older people who are starting to feel some of the health impacts, maybe have had a scare, with a bad, chest x-ray or something like that. And so those kinds of ads, and you may be referring to a campaign that the CDC runs called Tips from Former Smokers, is actually pretty effective in getting people to think about quitting and to take actions to quit, call a quit line, start to, become more invested in a quit attempt. But for young people, they don't think that's ever going to be them. So, one of the things that we try to do is we try to find ways to make tobacco feel relevant to young people. So young people don't think about tobacco all the time. It's one of the last things they think about. When you're young, what do you think about? You think about relationships. You think about money. Maybe you care about the environment, or you care about animals. So we're always looking for those connections. So for instance, we had some research that said you're twice as likely to get left swiped on a social dating app, Tinder, for example, if you post a picture of yourself smoking. Well, young people don't really care that tobacco is hazardous to their health, but they really care if it's deadly to their love life. So we created a whole campaign called Left Swiped At, which was really about getting left swiped because you're a smoker. Or we created another campaign that we called Catmageddon, which came from a fact. Dogs and cats are twice as likely to get cancer if their owner smokes. because they're subject to secondhand smoke just like people are. And while young people may not be that concerned about their own health, we all really love our pets, including young people. And what people especially love, not only their own pets, but they really love their cat videos, right? That is like, powering the internet. And so we created this very fun piece of advertising that had a really serious message that, well, if cats are twice as likely to get cancer if their owners smoke, then, oh my God, all the cat videos could literally disappear overnight if that happened. And that would literally be Catmageddon. And that was, a very, very funny video that we created that had a pretty serious message about the impact of secondhand smoke. Unbelievably successful.
So, Robin, how would you say that the truth movement marketing is different than other types of marketing?
One of the things that we have shifted in our campaign over the years, when truth first started in 2000, different generation of people, Gen X, very independent, very rebellious, don't tell me what to do. And of course, the internet and certainly social media was, not really existent, glimmers in people's eyes. And so we were very much focused on individual behavior, right? What we wanted you as a person at risk for smoking to think about, to know, and ultimately to make choices about. But as we've moved forward, we really have embraced the idea of a movement because the reality is more young people don't smoke than smoke. When we sort of reintroduced the Truth Campaign, this is going back to 2014 now, the stats were at that time 9% of young people smoked, which means 92% didn't. So how could we use the leverage of that 92% and their power to create social norms among their friends and their passion and their social networks to influence their peers? And that's how the campaign that got launched then, called Finish It, really came about. It was about starting a movement. It was about saying to young people that this is something, tobacco, cigarette smoking, that we could really end. Imagine, 92% of people already don't smoke. We just have to get the other 8%. And that has been sort of the underpinning of all the work that we've done from 2014 to today, is what we would call, denorming behavior, creating a social movement, making it cooler not to smoke than to smoke, to see it as an achievable goal. I mean, one of the things with social movements is some of them are very hard to achieve, right? I mean, they're worthy causes, ending poverty, ending hunger, climate change. I mean, all of those things that, those could take generations to really see meaningful difference in. And that is no reason why we shouldn't pursue them, because they're important. But this is one, especially for young people, that we felt you could own this. You literally could be the generation to end smoking. That would be one of the greatest public health, social change events, frankly, in modern history. When you think about the fact that over 500,000 people die each year just in the United States from tobacco-related disease, #1 cause of preventable death.
For you, the listeners of Scott Goodson's Uprising Pod, Warby Parker is offering a free 5-day home try-on to give you the opportunity to check out their glasses. To get your home try-on today, go to warbyparkertrial.com/uprising. Again, that's warbyparkertrial.com/uprising for your free 5-day home try-on.
You keep mentioning the millennial and the younger generations. That's whom your target is for this campaign. What do you think it is about your movement that connects so well with your audience?
Well, we do talk to millennials. I mean, a lot of it is also, even younger than, I guess, classically where millennials are. So Gen Z as well. Maybe they'll get a different name by the time this cohort moves completely through. They probably deserve more than just a letter. But I like to call them the socialites because they're so unbelievably influenced by social media. But I think what's appealing to this group, or what we try to harness, is the unbelievable power that they have to influence one another. The agency that creates, which when I talk to people sometimes, what amazes me is, so when I was younger, if you had 100 friends, you were the most popular kid in school. I mean, literally. I probably didn't have 100 friends that I could put on a list. Now, if you only have, 100, I'll use the word friends loosely, you're kind of a loner. People have thousands of people in their networks. That is unbelievably powerful for us to latch onto. The other things that we try to tap into is, what is, for this generation, we know, especially for Gen Z, that they are very concerned about the world they're growing up in. They do feel uncertainty. They're concerned about issues of equality, of what's fair and what's not fair, about social justice. So we do employ those themes in our advertising. For instance, we've just finished up some work that's been very successful for us, showing how the tobacco industry specifically targets and exploits people with mental health issues, how they target and exploit people in the military, which, I mean, that's just wrong. That just pisses our audience off, that, the brave young men and women that we, ask to crawl through the mud and defend us and be ready if something bad were to happen, and bad things certainly are happening in this world, that we don't care enough about them to protect them from something that maybe won't kill them tomorrow on a battlefield, but it'll kill them 30 years from now.
You mentioned that you wanted to make this generation the generation that ends smoking, and that's a pretty big goal. What steps are you taking to make this reality, and what challenges are you facing in the process?
We are making it a reality. I mean, I'll say when the Truth Campaign first started, this is back in 2000, 23% of young people, teenagers, smoked. If you can imagine that, a quarter. Today, that number is 6%. So 6% of 8th, 10th, 12th graders, so high school kids, smoke. I mean, that is unbelievable progress. So I have every confidence we will accomplish this goal of making tobacco a thing of the past, and that there will be a generation very soon for whom tobacco is not part of their lives. What worries me is a few things. One, that 6% number is not an even average across the United States. So we have some places where we've had unbelievable success, and then there are other places, a whole part of the country that, we've kind of termed Tobacco Nation, which is almost like its own country, stretches from Michigan down to Mississippi, north to south, and then east to west, from West Virginia to Oklahoma, where tobacco prevalence rates are extraordinarily high still. And that 66 million people live there, right? That's the size of France. It's a big, big part of our country. And the reason smoking rates are higher there is because they don't have, as my friends at the CDC would say, the full vaccine for anti-smoking in place. They don't have the right laws in place, clean air laws. We know those work. They don't have high enough taxes on tobacco. I mean, the one thing that's most effective in keeping young people from smoking is making it really, really expensive. Young people don't have a lot of money. or they don't have the funds being allocated to anti-tobacco programs. I mean, the Truth Campaign is very, very important. The FDA also runs a youth prevention campaign called The Real Cost, but we need local efforts too. So we have to get Tobacco Nation to be the place where other parts of the country are. We have to address pockets of the population. So, for instance, LGBT folks smoke at much higher rates than the general population. Some of that's cultural. A lot of that's because the tobacco industry has targeted and exploited them. You'll see huge sponsorships at gay pride events from Newport, for instance. And the other thing that, is out there is the tobacco industry isn't going away. They are incredibly rich. They are incredibly powerful. They have, leagues of lobbyists in Washington and across the country. There's an effort, for instance, right now to ban menthol in San Francisco. We know that menthol is a starter product for young people. So what's the tobacco industry doing? They're out in San Francisco paying people to sign petitions to prevent a law that was actually passed from going into effect. So we still have a lot of battles to fight, but it's winnable.
Another way that you're connecting with millennials is, of course, through social media and hashtags and apps. How has technology shaped your movement and helped you grow? Technology has been a great empower of our movement. When the Truth Campaign first started, it was, as public education campaigns were there, it was, a television campaign primarily. But we quickly learned actually the power of connecting with people individually, even back then in the, sort of pre-digital days. We always had a truth tour, so ways to connect with individuals and personalize the message on the ground. Obviously, that's been supercharged now with our ability to harness all of the various tools that are available. So I would say that, over 40% of our investment now is in digital and social vehicles. We have, we do things like gamers are very important to us. That's a population we really care about. So we've done a lot of things with Twitch. We were one of the earlier users of Snap, for instance, on National Geographic's channel, which has, had one of the first really big followings on Snap. We were there early on. We're still there. When we do a big launch on a TV tentpole event like the Grammys or the VMAs, we will have a whole supporting effort across, all the various music platforms on Spotify and across YouTube. So, our effort obviously is always about being, in places where young people, can engage with us, where we feel native, and where they can take action to share the message. Because anything that a young person shares in their own way and in their own voice and within their own networks is going to be way more powerful than something that is simply us talking to them. Another powerful tool you use in your movement is symbols. And symbols comes from the ancient Greek, which means mental contract. You would take a plate, for example, and you would meet someone and you would agree on an idea, and then you would break the plate, and each side would take a piece of that plate home as a symbol of that mental contract that you made up. So symbols are a very useful way to engage people, especially in a movement like you have. Can you talk a little bit about this sort of vibrant and recognizable orange logo that you have? What is the process like when creating these kind of symbols that are associated with your message and your movement and this fight you have?
It's interesting that you talk about symbols because we went through a big change here for the brand itself about 2 years ago. So the name of this organization was the American Legacy Foundation. That's the name that it was given when the attorneys general made the settlement. As you can tell, it's a spiffy name that you can imagine a bunch of lawyers coming up with. I always kid it around like American Legacy Foundation. Are we an insurance company, a hedge fund, or we could be a public health organization? But what was really powerful for us, and you hit it on the head, is the name truth. I mean, it is a very powerful word. That orange color, which has been associated with the brand since the beginning, and that truth, the dot logo, which is incredibly recognizable. And we have, 80% brand recognition among young people. And so we actually made the decision to let the campaign itself drive the rebranding of the entire organization, because it was a way to really leverage everything that people knew about us, gave us credit for, and to help elevate all the things we do at Truth beyond just the Truth campaign. We have a research foundation. We have a community and youth engagement program that goes in and activates young people. We have a tobacco-free campuses program that is literally going to college campuses all across America and getting them to go tobacco-free. So, the symbol of all the symbology of Truth is something, we really realize the value in.
With all this talk about marketing, I can't help but bring up your own personal experience as a marketing executive. How does your background help build this movement?
Yeah, I'm a marketer from way back, including things like, remember that crazy Clairol, yes, for herbal essences, and the Aflac duck, Aflac. I love saying that. So, when I had the opportunity to think about making the transition from the life spent in the advertising agency world, which I loved, building brands for clients that literally became iconic, and all the fun of working in a creative organization. The thing that really inspired me about this is I'd always been a fan of the Truth campaign. I'd always held it up as one of the great examples of, when advertising can be a force for good and create incredible change. So I thought it was an incredible honor that anybody would even ask me to be associated with it. And the other thing that I really felt is the tobacco industry had a lot of help in creating its legacy of death and disease in the United States and around the world. Joe Camel and the Marlboro Man, came off of Madison Avenue and elsewhere. I never contributed to it. I would never have worked on tobacco business, but this was sort of like a little like, hey, I get to use everything that I've learned and hopefully have developed some skill for over the years and use it as a force for good to, turn around what the tobacco industry, with a little help from, its advertising agency friends and PR, et cetera, took a long time to build up.
Talking about your past experience for a moment and all your achievements of the initiative, the Truth Initiative, it's easy to say that this has obviously been very successful. What would you say are some of the lessons from your movement that can be applied to other types of movements, to other people that are listening today who have their own fights that they want to unleash to the world, people wishing to change human actions specifically?
Sure. Well, we've learned a lot on the Truth campaign. I think, one of the things that we hold foundational is, and certainly in talking to our audience of younger people, is you have to meet them where they are, and you can never tell people what to do. The most important thing you can do is trust people, give them the facts, give them the tools, and allow them to make decisions based on what you've presented for them. I think, the other thing that we've learned over the years is we have an incredible gift now with what's happened in the social space and the ability to create movements through networks and to give people the tools to create those networks is really, really powerful. And I guess I would say the other thing that we've kind of learned, continuing to expose the tobacco industry and the things that they continue to do is very powerful. And I think that's a lesson for all movements.
Looking into the future, where do you see the Truth Initiative going? What's next?
Well, in the big future, I'd love to see us be out of business. I don't think it's happening tomorrow, but it could really happen. I mean, I could really imagine a time when some young person is digging in their backyard and finds a cigarette butt and goes to their mother or father and says, "Mommy, what's this?" I mean, I really can literally imagine that. But until then, we are going to continue to go where the epidemic is. So we've had tremendous success with the youngest teens. Smoking rates among middle schoolers are like below 5%. They're below 3% in some places. Huge success when you think about that's where most smoking is to initiate. Now, the place where we need to go is smoking is aged up. So a lot of people are experimenting with smoking when they're in college or they just get out of high school. And, social smoking, you see it all the time. I talked about Tobacco Nation and also looking at populations that are frankly being exploited by the industry. So, of course, we find it shocking that 86% of African Americans smoke menthol cigarettes. That's not by accident. That's because the industry has made it very, very easy for them. Looking at people of lower income who are targeted by the industry. We're partnering, for instance, with the NAACP on some efforts on their youth programs talking about the African American population again. So now it's really about pockets and making sure we don't leave them behind.
Wow, this has been truly fascinating. I need a cigarette. I'm just kidding. No, I don't smoke. Just kidding there. That's a bad joke. Where can listeners go to learn more about the Truth Initiative?
Well, I would love for them to come to truthinitiative.org is our organizational site, or if they're young folks who are huge fans of the Truth campaign, they can go to thetruth.com, which is the campaign site. And of course, follow us at Truth Orange for the Truth campaign and at Truth Initiative for the organization.
Robin, this movement is truly a game changer, and it is the gold standard and something that I think all of us admire. And we very much appreciate you joining us today here on the Uprising Podcast. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And yeah, I look forward. Maybe we'll talk again in the not too distant future when we really do have a culture where youth and young adults reject tobacco. That's my mission.
Thank you for joining us on the Uprising Pod today. If you want to find out more about our guests or learn how to create your own movement, please go to scottgoodsonsuprising.com. You can also download the show from iTunes or where other podcasts are curated. The Uprising Pod is executive produced by Frank Olito, produced by Nicola Keneally, and edited by Russell Costanzo. With special help from Melanie Boardman, Karin Drachenberg, Philippa Freeman, Brianna Campbell, Farshad Faroudi, Mark Bruzy, Mark Issam, and Jonathan Weeks. My name is Scott Goodson, and you've been listening to the Uprising Pod, where we can learn about movements and uprisings that are shaping our world, in business, in society, and in between. For more on cultural movements and movement marketing, be sure to pick up a copy of the best-selling book, Uprising: How to Build a Brand and Change the World by Sparking Cultural Movements, available on Amazon.com. If you have a moment, please do give us a favorable review on iTunes so that our movement moves up the ranks of the iTunes podcast list. And if you have ideas for future shows, please let us know by going to scottgoodsonsuprising.com. Thank you, and speak to you soon.